Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the brand new RC-505 loop station Mark II, which, if I'm perfectly honest, it's the first time I've had one of these RCs in my hands, and I can't believe I've lived my life so long without one. It is really an impressive piece of equipment. This is the Mark II. The Mark I, as we know, has been around for quite a long time, and as legend had it, it was sort of conceived after somebody won the World Beatboxing Championships, and they took a Boss looping pedal and sort of put it on the desktop. And someone at Boss went, that's an interesting idea, so they created this form. The Mark I has been the gateway piece of equipment to so many musicians starting out life by looping, and it really has been a kind of seminal piece of equipment in terms of music technology. I'd say very influential. The Mark II, which is what we've got here, has taken a lot of information from those users. Roland have been canvassing them and figuring out what they wanted to add to the Mark II from the Mark I. And as such, the Mark II has the following improvements. Better sound engine. This has now got a 32-bit sound engine. We've also got better A to Ds and D to As. And this was one of the criticisms of the original. What you put in didn't sound the same when it came out, and now I can confirm the A to Ds and D to As on here and the internal processing, certainly the sound quality has improved. I don't have any experience of the original, but you know, lots of people who have tell me, yeah, the sound quality wasn't great. I still can't believe I didn't get one. I mean, this just seems very geared to the sort of thing that I do, and now I've got it in my hands, it's a bit mind-blowing, to be honest. Other features, we've got improved track sliders. These go up to I think they're 45mm, the other ones are a bit shorter. They're still like this kind of quite flicky plastic crossfade type thing, which might be useful, I guess. We've got new input and output effects, A through D on input and A through D on output. These are also switchable by track, or you can assign them to specific tracks. Quite interesting configuration possibilities there. We've got a larger LCD, which is always welcome, so we can see more information on it. I don't know if you can see here, but honestly, my hands aren't really grubby. It's just this classic Roland black gloss that shows up all kinds of fingerprints and smudges. Shame about that, but hey, we can't have that. Extended input and output section. We've now got 2 mic inputs, 2 sets of instrument stereo inputs, plus 6 outputs. I think the original had 1 and a sub. This has now got main stereo, sub stereo 1, sub stereo 2, plus control of phones. And I think for those people who are perhaps using this as a setup, as a part of a setup for their live thing, not only do you get 6 inputs which are mixed into the output and you can put effects on, but you can also then subdivide those out and have those go to front house in different mixes, which I think people will find invaluable. That's a really big improvement. We've got new rhythms because there is a backing track kind of rhythm. It's quite basic, but it allows you to put variations in there. You can actually put your own in there as well. And the tempo is taken from the sort of smart auto tempo recognition. If you record your first loop, it kind of does a pretty good job of figuring out what the tempo is, or you can do tap tempo. You can also, when you tap tempo, you're changing the pitch of those loops, or not the pitch, but the timing of those loops. Longer recording time. Now, for those of you who thought 3 hours wasn't enough, we now have 13 hours of recording time, which is insane, really. There's no access to that storage. You can't kind of flip out an SD card. I don't know what's inside. I know in the Mark I there was an SD card inside, which some people, brave people, took out and replaced with larger ones to increase the size, but you've also got the ability to get that audio out, as with the old one, on the USB connection, so that's kind of cool. The other thing is these assignable switches. These are now assignable, so they don't necessarily have to perform the functions that they say on them. There are basically 10 functions, and they can go to a massive number of places. And for those of you who think, oh yeah, so what? It's actually a really big deal, because I think if you're a performer who works in the moment, having buttons that you can assign to do specific things like, I don't know, you know, reverse or half tempo or whatever on these is really key, because you can then introduce your muscle memory. This can also be assigned over MIDI as well, so we've got a lot of potential to kind of create your desired workflow and desired workspace. With all of that together, I think we've got quite a powerful unit. Right, to get things going, I thought if I just record a couple of things and then I can kind of show you roughly what loopers do. So first of all, I'll make sure I've got a clear looper. I just press and hold, and that clears anything that's on each individual track. Just do it this way, it's pretty straightforward. So now I've got, the way it's set up at the moment is I have all of the inputs are live. So effectively I've got my synth here, then I've got this little synth here, which is the Korg NTS1. That's coming into input 2. I've got my mic coming in on mic 1, which if I switch it on, you can hear 1, 2, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. And all of these inputs can be live at the same time. They can all feed into a single loop track, so you can have multiple people playing and record a loop. It would only be one layer, or you can route, which is the other thing. If I come in close here, go to my track menu, and we go through all the parameters. What we can do is just switch which inputs are live to each track, so they could be different for each track. So say for instance I might say I want no, I don't want the mic in track 4, you know, say, but I want it in track 1. So this is actually really handy because as well as running as a sort of mixer effectively with line inputs, it also allows us to route specific things to specific tracks. So we'll come back here. Now we come to our expanded input effects. Now if I switch this on, I've got a reverb, a live reverb that I could get to by pressing edit. So now these are all the parameters for reverb. If I go to B, I've got an amp sim. And we've got press and edit. We've got all the parameters there. And these are they're quite significant. I guess some of this might be Cosm stuff because it is Boss. And then I've got another, which is, in this instance, it's a tremolo. But then my last one is a auto harmonizer, which may not sound all that great like that, but when you put it on a voice or some other thing, it's actually quite cool. And because it's auto, you could also, with this particular algorithm, take it MIDI input and have it harmonized to the sort of maybe chords you're playing. But there are a ton of effects in here, and there are lots of new ones as well. So it's actually quite flexible. So let's just record a loop in here. And as you'd expect with a looper, literally I just hit go. So I'm going to put let's record a bit of loop. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have, with all my input effects recorded, that's kind of printed effectively. And it's set the tempo based on my loop, which, let's have a look, would appear to be 133.6 it's got there. So I can now, I could put my rhythm on, which is playing live effectively. I can affect the rhythm, I can change the rhythm track, so I can change the sound, I can change the patterns. It's very basic stuff. It's not what you call, I wouldn't necessarily use it for production ready stuff, but it can be quite useful for getting that initial loop in time. And you can set the levels of these tracks, so you can have it quite quiet, or you could feed it out to just the headphones so that the front of house wouldn't hear it. There are lots of routing possibilities, so it's quite handy. But now I've got that tempo set up, I've also got the MIDI outputs coming out and into my polybrute. So if I've got a patch here, so I've got, let's take these effects. So I've got, in this instance, I've got a timed LFO, which is in sync. So if I come back here, yeah. So that's in sync. So that means I can now record a separate loop into maybe track 2. Let's start with 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all stop. So now I've got my 2 loops in there, that's all great. What I can also do now is build on those tracks. And this is one thing that I was kind of hoping this is just an aside here, what I thought, because we can route all these inputs to different tracks, I thought it'd be really cool to maybe be able to record to multiple tracks at the same time, but you can't. You can only record to one active track at a time. You can't record to 2 or 3 and have different inputs going to each one. Unfortunately, it's just not capable. Maybe that's something they could do in an upgrade, because that would make it really powerful then for capturing sort of group takes. So let's just press go. That's cool. Maybe what I'll do, I'll undo that. I didn't like it. Or maybe I did. Yeah, let's keep it there. So that level of undo is also possible, so we can create undo for each track. We've also got marking points, which are a bit more buried. You have to kind of set those up to be function keys, but you can set a mark point, so you can say, right, if I undo, it won't go any further back than this, which is kind of handy. Right, so that's the basic kind of looper function. So you imagine I'm building this up, I can pile stuff on top of each other. I run out of tracks. On the old version, that was that. But now we've got a new feature, which is bounce. So if I just come in really close, we go to loop, press record, and then come in, and I've got my bounce switch on. That is default off. So bounce is on. I then need to go to my track menu, and let's just have a look, scroll through. So bounce is on. It's not on for any of the other tracks, but it is on for 5. Let's just say, because I'll bounce to 5, it kind of makes more sense. So now I can come out, I can record. So if I do... So now, those 2 tracks are bounced onto this guy. All stop. So you can see very quickly I can build up these enormous soundscapes. And I think when you see experienced loopers, which I do not count myself, then they can use those in really creative ways. So they could be building up enormous like swaves of backing vocals and bounce them onto specific tracks, do it in sections. There's all sorts of potential there for some very smart things to be done. I'm just going to put a couple more things in here. So now, just stop that. So now I'm going to just demonstrate a little bit more of what's going on with the effects. So I've got my voice here, which is coming in. You'll have to take my word on it. But what I've actually done is, if I just go to my B effect, I've got a vocoder in, which is M. So that means that what I'm doing is I'm bringing in the MIDI from this keyboard into it, which is controlling the carrier of this, because I don't really want to. So if I play, you can hear that's my voice. I'm not gonna. I've got a bit of a cold. I'm not going to sing, but I can go la la la. So rather than have you deal with that, I'm just going to go to the balance. I'm going to go full vocoder, then I can go la, la, la. So I can play in a vocal line that is better than my actual voice right now. I mean, I can't sing anyway, but so I'm just going to record that into a new loop. I've actually put that bass line in. So now I'm going to clear, let's just record that into loop 1. So I'll just clear this loop, and then we'll do that. So as you can see here, I can actually set the insert to be whatever input I like. So it could be all mics or whatever. So in this one, I've got it on the mic. So now that means that, you know, I could actually have this live set up with a different effect on each of these inputs as I see fit, or a combination of ones, which is kind of handy because I don't really want the vocoder to be happening on my synth input. So 1, 2, 1, 2. So now you can't hear me, but if I go la, that's a bit better. Right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press all go. My bass is in. that's all cool. So I've got that in there. Sounds a bit dry. So now we can move over to the track effects. So the track effects are applied to each individual track, and you can switch them on using these buttons, or you can do them in the menu, because you might want to choose these buttons for something else. So now when I press play, I've got my harmonizer on here, which is just set to be on track 1 only. Then I've got a bit of delay, which is mod delay, and then I think I've got a reverb, which is common to all of the tracks. Yeah. We come back to this guy. You can see that this is auto harm. What that means is I can play MIDI, because I've got MIDI connected up, and I can actually affect the harmony that this is happening here. So effectively I can kind of harmonize in key with whatever chords I'm playing, which is a nice touch. So if I just come back here and let's just play. So nice, a nice touch, and while it's not, you know, the finest harmonizer in the world, certainly in the live environment with a bit of kind of energy going behind, you're probably not going to notice. But once again, just the fact that I've got these two effects are basically mapped to track 1, and these other two will be more global, where I can switch them on or off for each track. So if I switch them on here, whoops. But these two just affect track 1. So this again just makes it a very powerful kind of effects and routing processor combined with the looping. So I would say, you know, nice touch. Also, these knobs generally affect one of the sort of major parameters. Let's just do a low pass filter, switch that on, put the whole lot on. So again, I've got sort of more performance controls. Again, you know, this thing is very much geared towards the performance control aspect of things. One thing I didn't really see, and I would like to have seen, is some kind of peak level indicator on the inputs, because I don't really know, apart from my ear, whether or not I'm overloading it. I mean, yeah, I've got access to the menu and I can check and see the levels in the mixer, and that's okay. I've got gains for each one, but it's a sort of different process. One thing that's a new feature in the Mark II also is the concept of mark undo points and record undo points. On the previous version, you just had an undo redo, which was, you know, I don't like that. Put the track back into a new state. But now there's a thing called marker points, and what that does is sort of set a bookmark effectively. So if you've built up a bunch of stuff and overdubs and you like it, then you want to fix that in time, you press the mark point, and what that does is kind of gives you a point to go back to. If you go too far, you can just go undo right back to that particular save state. But you've also got another save state, which is the record undo, which will be the state that you got to from your first record into the loop. So effectively you have two states that you can have any track within. It's not all that straightforward, because you do need to assign that to buttons, because it's basically not on the front panel. So what I would do here is on track 1, you can see that these two are slightly different colours. I've got my track button set to mark set. Now what that does is set the bookmark effectively of the loop state I want it to be. And you can have one for each track here. So that means that we've got multiple possibilities of combinations. Then, if I just come out one and I scroll along to my track effects button, that means the effects button will now mark back and record back. So if I press it once, it will jump back to that bookmark I've set. If I hold it, it will go back right to the beginning where to the first state of the loop that I recorded is. Are you with me? Because it did take me a little bit of time to get my head around, but actually it's a really powerful function because effectively each track has up to 3 states. So let me demonstrate. I've recorded a bass line into this. That's fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to record some other stuff overdub onto that track. Start with one of my favourite chords. Let's do that now. 3, 4. So there's my point. What I actually want to do is I'm going to mark that as a point that I would like to come back to. So now I can keep going. Let's find another sound in here. Let's just try that. So now we come back here and we go back. What I can do now is I can just go back to my safe state. Or I can go right back to my initial record loop or back to my safe state. And then I could maybe record something else. Save that to my save state. So I'll go back to my record state, which is just the bass line in there. Then I go back to my save state that I have here. And then I could add, you know, let's add a whole load of other stuff. Rubbish, so I'll just go back to my save state. Or I could go right back to my starting point and build a whole nother set of layers on top of it, and maybe I want to replace that my save state. So if you can imagine, in the moment, that creates an enormous, I mean, it's like a sort of almost an impossibly difficult to manage matrix of possibilities. But as we know, people who tend to perform with loopers have fairly astonishing brains, more powerful than me. But you can imagine, if you wanted to set that up, you could set that to be across all of these tracks. So you can have 5 tracks with all of that going on, or you can have combinations. You maybe use a couple of tracks for building those and then use the other 3 tracks in regular mode where you're switching the effects on and off, or assign those buttons to something else. It's entirely up to you. And in many ways, that's what makes this so powerful. I mean, it's a real paradigm shift in how we can set this thing up. And when you bring MIDI controllers into this as well, we can assign a ton of functions via MIDI controls. So, you know, you might want to keep all your buttons familiar, or you might want to change them for something else and use MIDI controllers to do things like marking loops and whatnot. That could be a foot pedal, it could be any number of things. I mean, it really is, the sky's the limit. And I think this is what shifts the Mark II into a completely different stratosphere. I'm probably using too many superlatives here, but really, it's a really big deal because it opens up the amount of possibilities enormously. Okay, there's a couple more things to look at. Obviously, we can connect the RC-505 via USB. We'll just go Menu, USB, Storage. So now that is connecting. And if I go to my screen, I should be able to see this as storage. So this is the way that it's all structured. We've got the wave data. There actually, well, I'm here. There are 99 memories in this thing. So yeah, plenty of places to store. I recorded some stuff in 9. So each folder has its own WAV. That's all great. You could drag all of that and then bring that into your DAW. Or you could go to download Boss Tone Studio for Mac OS or PC. Boss Tone Studio, let's open that up. Boss Tone Studio, here we go. And so it's connecting up. It's a little bit clunky. I mean, you know, Roland software isn't perhaps the finest UI in the UI experience, but it does work. So if we go back to the main screen, one thing that's actually pretty cool is we can open up, there are lots of loop collections, so you could actually download things. So I could take a number of tracks here. So let's just say, let's download this guy, fingerstyle drums and bass. So if I click on download, I've got one in memory. I'll put it in memory 1 and I'll just download that to, there we go. Download that, that's processing and downloading it too. So now if I go to my memory 1, I've got that track that I imported. So let's see if I press. So now I've got that bass line. This guy's a really funky bass player. And I can play along. I'm not going to pretend that I can play along with someone that good, but you get the drift. So you can download these, you know, combined tracks, and it's kind of cool because it means that you can jam along with other people, but by the same token, you can import your own loops into there and, you know, maybe transfer them that way. It's just perhaps not the most slick software experience. Just so you know, we can set phantom power on the inputs. We can set the instrument gain to be instrument or line. We can set stereo link for mics and instrument tracks, so we could actually have mono inputs. There's a whole ton of configurations, and that's the one thing I will say about this. There are so many parameters in here. They really haven't left anything out, and I don't know whether this is, a lot of this stuff is new to the RC Mark II or whether it was there on the Mark I, but it's really good to see this level of detail and control in there. One major thing that I perhaps forgot to mention was the fact that this does real-time time stretch. So I've taken my track here and I just press play. Original tempo is 144. Let's say I want to adjust that. Pretty decent, short, you know, small increments in tempo. I can also go way further, and you start to hear those artifacts there. So for extreme, as with most time stretch stuff, I mean, extreme time stretch is not going to be so good, but you can. This could mean that we could be running the clock from an external device. So I don't know, maybe you could do it so that you could actually have a MIDI trigger. So you would actually have maybe a drummer kind of driving the tempo of the loop. So you record your loop in and it could follow it. Small deviations of tempo are entirely possible, I would imagine. One more thing that I didn't mention, and that is that we have the ability to address the rhythm tracks over MIDI. So it defaults to channel 10, but what it does mean is if we set one of these tracks to take its input from the rhythm track, we could actually record our own pattern into this. So if this was synced up to an external sequencer, we can have individual notes playing our own patterns and record those in rather than alongside. It does use up a track, but hey. And the other thing, which just probably look at a few kits. I mean, there's no real editability apart from, you know, no levels or effect sends, but there's a few sounds in here which, you know, some of them might be useful, some of them may not. All sorts of variation on patterns. There's actually quite a lot of pattern variation here. And I believe it is possible to create your own user pattern, but there's only one of them, so it's not like you could create your own song and you know, run those alongside your loop tracks. You've just got the option of one user memory, which is, you know, better than nothing. So how do I feel about the RC-505 Mark II? Well, there's no denying this is a really impressive piece of equipment. Like I said, I don't have experience of the 505 initially, but I know that Gaz swears by it. He thinks it's one of his most favourite pieces of equipment. And I can kind of see why, because this thing just seems to do so much stuff that makes putting musical ideas down and storing them and building them and creating a kind of vibe while you're doing it so easy. But at the same time, it's got a massive amount of possibilities. The fact that we can route things to individual effects on input, the fact that we've got track effects, we can bounce internally, huge amounts of recording time, we can get that stuff off and put it on the computer and incorporate it into our DAWs, the better sound quality. I mean, these are all things that make what was already a pretty damn fine piece of equipment, from what I understand, really good. And as a newcomer to the 505 series, I find it hard to fault this, really. I mean, at the price, I think it's around $599 UK. Other currencies will scroll below. It seems like it's a real tour de force. And I hope I'm not being sort of too lavish with praise, but it just feels like such a brilliantly thought out piece of equipment that if you're looking for a looper that kind of does a lot of stuff, then I can't think of anything else that would do this much at this price. So that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, if you're interested in our Patreon, we have extras on all our reviews, lots of stuff up there, so you can access that via the URL below. But that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.